becomes bad in the winter, and I think it was holding it together, which wasn't much. It's gone now.
For many years, fans of Alaskan Bush People believed they understood the Brown family completely. The show presented them as different from the modern world. They lived close to nature. They built their own homes. They hunted, fished, and survived harsh winters together. They called themselves the Wolf Pack, a name that symbolized loyalty, unity, and strength. The family often spoke about freedom. They believed that modern society made people weak and dependent. In contrast, they believed the wilderness made them strong. Among the brothers, Bam Bam Brown stood out in a quiet but powerful way. He was not the loudest. He did not seek attention. He often listened more than he spoke. Viewers saw him as thoughtful, steady, and serious. He seemed like the son who carried his father's beliefs deeply inside him. When his father spoke about independence, Bam Bam stood close, nodding with quiet agreement. To fans, he looked like the most grounded and emotionally balanced member of the Wolf Pack. The foundation of the family's identity came from their father, Billy Brown. He believed strongly that life in the wilderness was the purest way to live. He spoke about rejecting what he saw as a broken system. He wanted his children to grow up free from rules, institutions, and outside control. For Bam Bam, this belief shaped his childhood. He learned how to survive in the wild before he learned traditional school subjects. He learned how to build shelters before he understood algebra. The wilderness was not presented as one option among many. It was presented as destiny. From a young age, Bam Bam understood that being a Brown meant being different. It meant surviving when others could not. It meant answering to nature, not to society. This message was repeated often. Over time, it became part of his identity. When the television show began, that identity was shared with millions of viewers. The world saw a family that seemed united in belief and purpose. And Bam Bam appeared to be one of the strongest supporters of that purpose. As the show became popular, the Wolfpack image grew stronger. The Browns were not just a family anymore. They became symbols of wilderness independence. Interviews focused on their unique lifestyle. Episodes showed them building, hunting, and solving problems without outside help. Bam Bam's role was important. He often appeared as the calm voice during disagreements. When tension rose between siblings, he leaned toward reason instead of anger. When big decisions were discussed, he seemed serious and focused. Many fans described him as the emotional anchor of the family. He seemed fully committed to the wilderness life. But real life is often more complex than television. Even while cameras were rolling, the family still had to interact with the outside world. They had to manage contracts. They had to deal with property laws. They had to handle money from the show. Even families who reject modern systems cannot fully escape them. Over time, Bam Bam began to notice this reality more clearly than before. Years before the cameras arrived, the Browns did not always live in complete isolation. At times, they stayed in Washington state. During these periods, Bam Bam saw structured communities. He saw neighborhoods where people had regular jobs and stable income. He saw systems that functioned regardless of the weather. These experiences may not have changed his loyalty to his family, but they likely planted small questions in his mind. What if wilderness life was not always possible? What if health problems made survival harder? What if financial challenges forced change? These were not dramatic thoughts. They were quiet concerns that grew slowly over time. According to public records that later surfaced, Bam Bam began preparing in small ways during the mid-1990s. He reportedly enrolled in community classes under a formal version of his name. These classes focused on construction and property basics. At first, this may have seemed harmless. Learning skills does not mean rejecting beliefs, but knowledge can open doors to new possibilities. Slowly, education turned into opportunity. In the early 2000s, Bam Bam reportedly became involved in small renovation projects in Washington. These were not flashy business deals. They were practical investments connected to property improvement and development. He eventually formed partnerships and registered business entities. All of this was done legally. There were no secret crimes or hidden scandals. The documents were public, but they were separate from his television identity. On camera, he spoke about independence from modern systems. Off camera, he was learning how those systems worked. This is where the idea of a double life begins to form. It was not about deception in a criminal sense. It was about separation. He kept his business activities in one world and his family identity in another. He may have believed that mixing the two would create confusion or conflict. After all, the wolf pack image depended on the idea of full commitment to wilderness living. Admitting involvement in structured investments might weaken that message. When Alaskan Bush People became a major success, the separation likely became even more important. The show's appeal relied on a strong and simple story, a family surviving outside the system. Bam Bam understood that public perception matters in television. If viewers believed the myth, they would keep watching. If the myth cracked, interest might fade. So he reportedly managed his business interests quietly. Meetings were scheduled during breaks in filming. Documents were filed under his formal name. He maintained professional relationships that did not overlap publicly with his Wolfpack identity. This required discipline. It required emotional balance. Living in two worlds at the same time is not easy. It can create stress, even if there is no wrongdoing involved. After Billy Brown's health began to decline, the pressure increased. The family's future felt uncertain. Income from television is not guaranteed forever. The wilderness lifestyle depends heavily on physical strength. Bam Bam may have seen structured investments as protection rather than rebellion. When Billy passed away in 2021, everything changed emotionally for the family. The patriarch who had shaped their worldview was gone. Grief filled the space he left behind. During this time, Bam Bam appeared strong and supportive. He helped his mother. He supported his siblings. Publicly, he spoke about honoring his father's legacy. But privately, according to reports, he increased his involvement in property ventures. This may have been his way of preparing for long-term stability. Still, the longer he kept this side of his life quiet, the more complicated it became. Silence can feel protective at first. Over time, it can feel heavy. By early 2025, public access to digital records made it easier for people to connect information. A contractor reportedly noticed his name on property filings. Journalists followed the trail. Soon, the story became public. Headlines described it as a double life. But the truth was more layered than that phrase suggests. It was not about crime. It was about identity, belief, and preparation. When the story became public in early 2025, it did not explode overnight. At first, it appeared as a quiet online article. The report showed public documents connected to property investments in Washington state. The records were not hidden. They were legal filings that had existed for years. What made them powerful was the timeline. Some of the business activity reportedly stretched back nearly 3 decades. That meant the investments began long before television fame. Once readers connected the name on those documents to Bam Bam Brown, the reaction slowly started building. Social media posts appeared. Discussion forums lit up. Some fans felt confused. Others felt disappointed. A few defended him immediately, saying that planning for the future is not wrong. The word double life began trending in headlines. But the situation was more complicated than that phrase suggested. Inside the Brown family, the first reaction was not anger. It was silence. According to reports, the siblings gathered privately before making any public statements. There were no cameras in the room, no producers guiding the conversation. It was just family. The documents were placed on the table. Everyone read them carefully. The question was simple but heavy. Is this true? Bam Bam did not deny it. He acknowledged his involvement in property ventures and structured investments. He explained that everything was legal and properly filed. He said he saw it as preparation, not betrayal. For him, it was about building stability in case television ended or the wilderness lifestyle became impossible to maintain. But for some of his siblings, the issue was not legality. It was trust. The wolf pack had always been built on the idea of shared struggle. They believed they faced the world together. Now they were realizing that one member had been walking an additional path, quietly, for years. One brother reportedly asked a difficult question. "Why didn't you tell us?" It was not shouted in anger. It was asked with confusion. Bam Bam's answer was calm. He said he did not want to create fear or division. He believed that if the investments failed, he alone would carry the burden. If they succeeded, the family would benefit. In his mind, he was protecting them from uncertainty. But silence can create distance, even when intentions are good. Some siblings felt hurt, not because of the investments, but because they had not been included. The idea that the wolf pack was completely united had been part of their identity for years. Now that image felt more complicated. The conversation lasted for hours. There were no dramatic exits. There was no shouting match that ended relationships. Instead, there was a quiet shift in understanding. Trust had not been destroyed, but it had been tested. Soon after, production teams connected to Alaskan Bush People requested clarification. From a legal standpoint, there was no violation. Cast members were not required to reveal every private business activity. The show focused on family life and wilderness survival, not full financial disclosure. Still, public perception mattered. The series had long highlighted separation from modern systems. Viewers debated whether that image had been too simple. Some fans posted supportive messages, saying Bam Bam was smart to prepare for the future. Others accused him of contradicting the spirit of the show. Online comments became divided. But as more details came out, it became clear that there was no criminal investigation and no lawsuit. This was not a story of fraud or hidden crime. It was a story about belief, image, and personal growth. In mid-2025, Bam Bam released a calm public statement. He did not attack critics. He did not blame the media. Instead, he explained his perspective. He said he loved his family deeply. He said his loyalty to the wolf pack had never changed. He described the investments as practical preparation for an uncertain future. He also admitted that he should have been more open with his siblings earlier. That admission mattered. It showed reflection. Public reaction slowly began to soften. People started discussing a different angle. Maybe it is possible to value independence and still understand the importance of long-term planning. Maybe reality television simplifies people into roles that do not fully capture who they are. Bam Bam had been presented as the pure wilderness son. In reality, he was also a man thinking about stability, property, and responsibility. Within the family, change happened slowly. Conversations became more honest. Documents that had once been private were now discussed openly. Transparency replaced silence. Some siblings adjusted quickly, recognizing that income from television cannot last forever. Others needed more time to accept that the Wolfpack myth was not as simple as it once seemed. But something important did not happen. The family did not fall apart. There were no public breakups, no permanent divisions. Instead, there was a quiet recalibration. Unity was no longer based on the idea that everyone followed the exact same path. It was based on accepting that each member might prepare for the future in different ways. By late summer of 2025, headlines had slowed down. Online debates became less intense. The world moved on to other stories. But inside the Brown family, the impact remained meaningful. The experience forced them to confront a deeper truth. Identity is rarely one-dimensional. A person can love the wilderness and still learn how modern systems work. A person can believe in family loyalty and still build private stability. For nearly 30 years, Bam Bam balanced two worlds. One was visible and celebrated on television. The other was structured and practical, built quietly through legal documents and property agreements. When those two worlds finally met, they did not destroy him. They revealed him as more complex than viewers had imagined. In the end, the phrase double life may not fully describe what happened. It suggests deception and secret wrongdoing. But in this case, the situation appears more human than dramatic. It reflects growth, fear of uncertainty, and the desire to protect loved ones. Bam Bam Brown remains part of the wolf pack. The wilderness is still part of his identity. But now the public understands that he is also someone who thinks ahead, plans carefully, and prepares for change. The myth of perfect separation from modern life has softened. In its place stands something more realistic. The family is not built on fantasy, it is built on adaptation. And sometimes, adaptation is the strongest survival skill of all. After the initial shock of the revelation, the Brown family faced a period of adjustment. Weeks passed, and what first felt like tension slowly shifted into dialogue. Siblings began to ask questions, not with anger, but with curiosity. They wanted to understand why Bam Bam had kept his property investments and structured ventures private. The conversations were honest and raw. One sister reportedly said softly, "We just didn't know. We thought we knew everything about each other." Bam Bam replied calmly, "I was trying to protect us. I didn't want to worry anyone, and I didn't want to fracture what we already had." That simple statement carried years of careful thought and careful balancing. He was not rejecting the family. He was carrying responsibility in a quiet way, away from the cameras, away from public judgment. For many of the siblings, this explanation took time to fully absorb. Trust, after all, is built slowly. And after decades of living together in isolation, the family had expectations about what loyalty and transparency should look like. Public reaction, too, evolved over time. At first, social media was divided. Some fans felt betrayed. They had loved Bam Bam as the dependable, thoughtful son. They had believed in the purity of the Wolfpack narrative, a family fully immersed in the wilderness, separate from modern life. To discover that he had quietly built a life in structured property development and investments felt like a contradiction. Others immediately defended him, noting that planning ahead is wise. After all, life in the wild is unpredictable. Property and financial planning do not negate love for the wilderness. Over time, more viewers began to see the nuance. They realized that identity is rarely simple, and that public personas often tell only part of the story. Bam Bam was not abandoning the Wolfpack or betraying the family philosophy. He was, in many ways, ensuring that the family could endure beyond the cameras, beyond the rugged forests, beyond the unpredictable challenges of wilderness life. Within the family, the revelation triggered reflection and recalibration. The Wolfpack had always believed in unity through shared struggle. Now unity had to accommodate complexity. Some siblings reportedly struggled with this. One brother quietly expressed frustration. "We were building cabins, surviving together, and you were building something else at the same time." Bam Bam did not argue. He simply said, "I was building for all of us." Over time, understanding began to replace tension. The family did not fall apart. They did not turn against him. Instead, they slowly acknowledged the practicality of his actions. The lesson became clear. Loyalty is not always about identical choices, but about shared intent and care. Bam Bam's decision to act quietly was an expression of loyalty, not deception. It was protection in a form that had simply been invisible until now. As the months passed, public statements, interviews, and on-set interactions reflected this new reality. Bam Bam remained part of the show. He continued to participate in family projects, construction, and discussions about land and future plans. Behind the cameras, he reduced the visibility of his property ventures, but remained engaged in them. Transparency replaced secrecy. Documents once hidden in private files were now openly discussed at family meetings. Small steps rebuilt trust within the wolf pack. Over time, the family grew to accept that duality can exist alongside loyalty. Bam Bam's public image evolved as well. Fans who once saw him only as the quiet, introspective wilderness son now recognized him as a thoughtful strategist, someone who could navigate both nature and society. For many, this layered identity added depth to a person they had admired for years.